The Kids Next Door was an organization that was packed with some of the toughest and coolest kids you'll ever see on TV. But almost none of the members of KND proved to be as aggressive or violent as Wallabee Beetles, aka Numbuh 4. Which is weird when you think about what his parents and the other members of his team were like. After analyzing his character a little further though, the answer to his aggression becomes really clear. And in this case, it has to do with some personal insecurities that Numbuh 4 has never learned to deal with. The first thing that you might think to look at when wondering where Wallabee got his aggressive attitude from is the kid's parents, but the series did a pretty good job showing that Numbuh 4 is almost nothing like his parents. Aside from their looks, they really didn't have much in common, at least not in the few episodes that his parents appeared in. The first of Numbuh 4's parents to appear was his father, Sydney, who played a role in the Season 1 episode, Operation Office. Throughout that episode, and any other time he appeared, Sydney was depicted as a very optimistic and happy person who does everything that he can for the betterment of his family. As for Mrs. Beetles, she's not that different from her husband. She didn't appear until Operation S.C.R.E.A.M, which was a few episodes after Sydney was introduced. Her character was given much less screen time than Numbuh 4's father, and she wasn't even given a name. Nonetheless, whenever she was shown, she had a big smile on her face and seemed to be quite kind. The only time fans ever got to see the dark side of Mrs. Beetles was in the episode Operation Breakup, when Numbuh 4 kept breaking all of her fancy vases. Other than that though, both of Numbuh 4's parents seem to have very different personalities from their son, especially when it comes to the use of violence. Now that's not to say that Sydney and Mrs. Beetles didn't have any bad habits that would make Numbuh 4 lash out. For instance, in the Season 3 episode, Operation Future, viewers learned that his parents would send him to various boarding schools whenever he was acting up. In the episode, Numbuh 4 discovered that he was being sent to St. Rita's Preparatory School, which is a boarding school that was supposed to be girls only. Although he had bigger problems to face with the director of the school wanting to transform all of the boys on the planet into girls, we learned through Numbuh 4's courage that he was used to this sort of treatment. Wallabee was unshaken when he learned that he was going to a boarding school because apparently he's escaped from them countless times before. This insinuates that whenever he does anything that gets him into trouble or that his parents disapprove of, instead of really dealing with the problem, they just ship him off to be fixed. I'm not one to judge, but that's definitely not the best way you should handle your child if they are being violent or aggressive. They're basically just learning that you don't really care about them, or at least not enough to help them yourself. I'm not saying that this is the only reason that Numbuh 4 was prone to violence, but it definitely didn't help. You might think I'm overreacting when I say that Numbuh 4 was violent, right? If you don't believe me though, take a look at how his character acted on Codename Kids Next Door. Numbuh 4 was depicted as the muscle in Sector V. According to his character description and what we've seen on the show, Wallabee was the toughest, fiercest, wildest, most dangerous, and most courageous member of the Kids Next Door. On top of that, alongside Numbuh 1, he has claimed the spot as the best fighter. In the episode Operation End, Numbuh 4 became the only member of the KND to defeat number 274, who is widely believed to be the best operative of all time. That being said, Numbuh 4 also had a bunch of negative traits, including the fact that he was hot-headed, arrogant, ignorant, sort of a bully, and all in all, not the brightest person in the world. He was constantly getting involved in fights, even if it was with villains, and he'd rather let his fists do the talking than use his words. So how did someone so violent come from a household with such jolly and non-violent seeming parents? Well, just because Numbuh 4 appeared to be tough and confident during most of his time with the Kids Next Door, fans know that wasn't always the case, and sometimes he just used false confidence to hide his insecurities. These insecurities often lead to impulsive and sometimes even violent attitudes in people. Looking back on it, Wallabee was insecure about a lot of things in his personal life, starting with his intelligence. Throughout the show, it's constantly pointed out that Numbuh 4 wasn't the sharpest crayon in the crayon box. In fact, in Operation Cannon, the only reason the Kids Next Door were able to defeat the delightful children from down the lane was because of Numbuh 4's stupidity. In the episode, Numbuh 1 has to leave to do a solo mission, and while he's gone, the rest of the team gets attacked by various villains, each of them losing every time. In fact, their last encounter of the night with the delightful children only ended because it was their curfew. Numbuh 4 then takes a joke that Numbuh 5 made about a clam cannon too seriously and forces the team into overtime to make it. However, he didn't look over the designs properly, so by the time it was finished, they had a faulty piece of equipment. Though neither Numbuh 4 nor his enemies knew that, the delightful children ended up attacking again, and this time they took the clam cannon for themselves and planned to use it on the kids next door. Luckily for the KND, Wallabee's defense mechanism wasn't working properly and exploded, launching their enemies far away from them. That being said, in the series, it's not a secret that Numbuh 4 wasn't that intelligent, which is probably what makes him so insecure about it. In fact, in Operation Feral, when Sector V needs a new leader, Numbuh 4 basically begs to be put in charge of the team, but Numbuh 86 refuses. He was actually the only member of the team who wasn't even asked, and it was likely because of his impulsive attitude and his lack of intelligence, which would only fuel his insecurities. When everyone knows a weakness that you have, it's hard to not lose some self-confidence. But in Numbuh 4's case, instead of learning to cope with it in a healthy way, he decides to overcorrect. He pretends to be very confident and even considers himself the toughest kid in the kids next door. If anyone were to tell him any differently, it would be time for a fight, because Wallabee doesn't know how to use his words without feeling stupid. This is really sad when you think about it, but it can't be the only reason why he lashes out so much, right? Well, oddly enough, one of the things that seemed to bother Numbuh 4 the most were things that he considered to be too girly, which could be another sign that he was insecure despite doing his best to seem confident. Adding yet another insecurity on top of him, already feeling like he's stupid, would only make Numbuh 4 lash out more or become more impulsive than he already was, which would explain why he was so rowdy. Wallabee detested anything pink, fluffy, or sparkly. But what he hated the most, or appeared to hate the most, were the kids next door's version of Care Bears, the rainbow monkeys. This was shown in a ton of episodes, but actually, if you look at Operation Feral again, the entire beginning of that episode took place on Rainbow Monkey Island, and Numbuh 4 was shown to be miserable. Now, Wallabee's reason for hating anything girly is more obvious than it seems, and it's because he wants to appear like a strong, manly man, which clearly stems from his insecurity or fear of looking weak. If you combine that idea with the fact that he had a huge crush on Numbuh 3, you can chalk up a lot of his toughness and impulsivity to Numbuh 4 just being a kid who thinks being strong and masculine will get him the girl. In other words, he didn't want to look weak or vulnerable in front of Numbuh 3, so he made sure that he picked on her for liking something girly. That obviously wasn't the right thing to do, or the proper way to show that you like someone, but it's what Numbuh 4 thought would work. Actually, that's another example of how he wasn't the smartest kid in class. Now, I know what you're asking yourself. Are these habits really such a bad thing for a kid like Numbuh 4? I mean, is he hurting anyone? Interestingly enough, Numbuh 4 wasn't the only one who was suffering from his aggressive attitude, because it seemed like his little brother Joey was about to follow in his big brother's footsteps. Joey was Wallabee's baby brother, who first appeared in the same episode as Numbuh 4's mom, Operation S.C.R.E.A.M. However, in that episode, all he did was cry after Sydney finished telling a really boring story. But a distaste for his dad's stories isn't the only thing that Joey and Numbuh 4 had in common. In the episode Operation Dodgeball, we learned that Joey was the best dodgeball player in his family. Throughout the episode, Numbuh 4's family gets kidnapped by the dodgeball wizard in order to force the kids next door member into a showdown. Despite supposedly being the best dodgeball player ever though, Numbuh 4 proved to be no match for the wizard. Joey, on the other hand, absolutely destroyed the villain in a citywide dodgeball fight that was epic to watch. As epic as it was though, it's hard to deny that dodgeball is a violent sport compared to some others, and the fact that Joey excelled at it might mean that he's prone to violence in some way as well. We know he didn't learn those antics from his parents though, which means he probably learned them from watching his older brother. In other words, Wallabee Beetles needs to get a handle on his violent attitude, otherwise his brother will continue to follow in his footsteps. What do you think though? Was it Numbuh 4's insecurities that caused him to be such a rough and rowdy kid? Or was it the fact that he kept being sent off to boarding school anytime he did something wrong? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below.